If there is one thing that goes along with the name of Verstappen, that has to be controversy. Almost every racing move of Verstappen is labelled with a controversial touch of deliberate action or immature racing, and lately it's been getting pretty hard to make a defence for the two-time world champion. However, due to his talent and dominance, he has a constant and stellar fanbase that supports him no matter what. Well, maybe he can't get away with anything. Following his actions in Brazil, the Dutchman has divided the world of F1, and we're not just talking about his fans, but also fellow racers. Max Verstappen decided to be the 18-year-old version of himself in Brazil, and his actions weren't really talkative for his maturity and his integrity as a racing driver, let alone a two-time world champion. What he did to Hamilton and to Perez, with the latter being a pivotal figure in Verstappen's two championships, hasn't been well accepted throughout the grid. Before we go to Brazil's actions, let's make a short recapitulation of Verstappen's career in Formula 1 and see when he started to divide the world as to whether he is talented or just crazy. Verstappen started with the controversies from day one, and in his debut in Australia, he started shouting and yelling on the radio as to why Sainz Jr., who was his teammate back then in Toro Rosso, just wasn't willing to let Verstappen go ahead of him. According to the Dutchman, he was the faster car, and there was no need to race. There you go, a classic division. On one side, you have the fans that are encouraging him to ask for what he deserves without a fight. And on the other side, you have the realists who are asking Verstappen to just race and shut his mouth. However, Verstappen didn't shut his mouth. He and Ricciardo, his teammate from 2016 to 2018, went into some fierce duels, with a culmination happening in 2018 in Baku. This was most likely the point at which Ricciardo decided that enough was enough, and that he would leave Red Bull because Verstappen is not the type of teammate you want. And at this point, the whole attention of Red Bull was already shifted towards Verstappen. And what is it with Verstappen and Brazil? In 2018, he was on pace to win the race, but for some reason, he decided that he wanted to fight with Ocon's Force India, while the Frenchman was trying to unlap himself. Had Verstappen let him go ahead, then he would have continued firmly and won the race ahead of Hamilton. But no, he has to win every race that's presented in front of him, and a collision in turn 1 meant he lost the lead to Hamilton and ended up in P2. Verstappen went to push and shove Ocon later in the garage, and in the press conference, he called him an idiot. In 2019, Verstappen had two teammates in Gasly and Albon. Both of them were nowhere near the level of Verstappen, but at least they weren't dividing the world with their actions, such as in the race in 2016 in Spa, where Verstappen got on the nerves of Raikkonen, the world champion from 2007. Alfa Romeo's boss Vasseur called Verstappen's move stupid at this point, while many fans were just sticking to the point that he was purely racing and that's it. 2021. I don't think you have to explain a lot. It was Verstappen's maiden championship, and when he sensed that he had a legitimate shot of winning the championship, his racing style changed. True, he was fast, but he wasn't backing down from any duels. We remember Imola, where he pushed Hamilton off the track, and Monza, where he parked his car on Hamilton's head and just refused to leave the space needed to avoid the sausage curb. Overall, Verstappen's career has been divided between aggressive racing and not knowing what the hell he does. But now, after Brazil, the arrogance of the Dutchman is going to leave a huge dark spot on his reputation and his career that is hardly going to be defended by his fans. Let's start, now go back to Brazil, and explain all of Max's antics one by one. For starters, he didn't let his teammate pass him on two occasions, during the sprint race and during the main race event. However, the race day event is the one that you're going to want to listen to, so don't go anywhere. The sprint race day wasn't really spectacular for Verstappen, as he lost 3 places due to floor damage and loss of downforce after picking up debris from Alonso's front wing. But when he found himself at P4, which would have meant that he'd practically start P3 due to Sainz's 5-place grid penalty, Verstappen had an opportunity to let go Perez and allow him to take one more point in the fight for P2 with Leclerc. True, it was a difficult situation, and Perez himself wasn't really close enough, at around 1.8 seconds off Verstappen. However, the Mexican asked for the position and his request wasn't granted. The fact that Leclerc was trailing Perez by around a second made the entire move even riskier, and not worth taking. So talks have started to circulate, but rest assured that this is just the tip of the iceberg. The race started the way it did, with Verstappen and Perez lining up at P3 and P4 respectively. During the safety car restart in lap 7, Verstappen tried to complete an overtake on Hamilton on the outside, and while doing that, he failed to get his car ahead of Hamilton's prior to the center corner. It was Hamilton's corner, according to the rules, and Verstappen stated that he knew Hamilton wouldn't back out, so the crash was unavoidable. This is a narrative that no champion should have in his head, let alone a young one that has so much influence on the other drivers and their inspiring talents. As for Hamilton, he said, "It's Max, what can I say?" after the race, meaning that he knew the duels with Max were always going to be risky and possibly costly. Max had to go for a front wing change, and after the stewards examined the situation, Max was handed a 5-second penalty for this infringement. Rest assured that the Dutchman wasn't happy, because he felt like Hamilton closed the door too late on him, but justice has been served. Luckily for Hamilton, he's been able to avoid bigger consequences, but the fact that he dropped down the grid has eventually cost him a lot, even though he managed to complete the 1-2 for Mercedes. Toto Wolff spoke about the incident between Max and Hamilton, and apart from him, Brundle also shared his thoughts on the incident. According to the Sky F1 pundit, Verstappen deserved a bit more space there, and it was Hamilton's fault. However, we are meeting the first division here, with the FIA believing that it was Verstappen at fault, hence the 5-second penalty. While Horner went in to defend his driver, Wolff said that it's struggling for him to comment on the situation, elaborating further. "I struggle to comment on the situation because it's irrelevant to me at that stage to attribute guilt or to have a judgment call here. I'd rather be happy about the win." On the other hand, Horner as always gave a supportive hand to Verstappen, adding, "I thought he'd earned a bit more space than he was given. Lewis could have given him a bit more to work with because Verstappen was ahead going into turn 1. It's unfortunate. I think it's the only incident that Max has had this year. So unfortunately, Max was deemed at fault with the 5-second penalty, which then just hurt our race even more. It was very frustrating. Nevertheless, the FIA has brought the final verdict, and on top of the 5-second penalty, Verstappen also received 2 penalty points on his super license, as he now has 7. 12 points is what leads to a ban, and some of Verstappen's points will soon expire, given the fact that they were handed out at the Qatar and Saudi Arabian Grand Prix towards the end of 2021. But the second incident that Max caused was the most controversial one, and it goes without saying that it left a huge black mark on Verstappen's legacy. Despite the fact that the 2-time world champion stated that he had his own reasons for what he did to Perez, the public's opinion of Verstappen is currently at an all-time low. It's not like Red Bull and Verstappen weren't bashed up until this point for the budget cap breach, and now with this situation, it's like they're trying to be the villains in the sport. Perez's race was ultimately ruined by a bad tyre strategy, as we saw that the medium compound tyres just weren't doing the job. Therefore, with the second safety car restart, Perez was doomed to failure. He got passed by Leclerc and Alonso and was on pace to finish the race P6. However, with Verstappen being P7 at this point, the team order for Perez to let go of Verstappen was given to both drivers, with the ultimatum that should Verstappen fail to pass Leclerc ahead of him and strip more points from the Monegasque, he is to return the position back to the Mexican. In a span of 5 laps, Verstappen was supposed to pass Alonso and Leclerc, who were both 1 second ahead of him. But when it became evident that he couldn't achieve this accomplishment, many expected him to give the position back to Perez. Still, the Mexican didn't receive it back, and he was around 2.5 seconds behind Verstappen at this point of the race. When Verstappen was asked to why he didn't do what he didn't do, he said that he has his own reasons, and that the team sat down after the race and discussed this entire situation. So it's all perfectly clear now. On top of that, he added that he is very happy that the situation has been resolved this way, and if Perez needs the extra point in Abu Dhabi, of course Verstappen would give him the win or his position. But Perez wasn't happy with how the situation had transpired, and after everything he's done for the team, to be treated this way is by no means the treatment he deserves. That is why many Max fans went on to bash him and talk about his incapability of being an F1 driver and a teammate. Furthermore, fans spoke about the fact that after the Brazilian Grand Prix, nobody would want to be Verstappen's teammate due to the fact that they can't count on him when it matters the most. Twitter went truly ballistic when it came to Verstappen's actions, as some of the comments were, "Pathetic from Verstappen at the end. Checo has obeyed team orders on so many occasions with no resistance. He can't even do it once, showing his ugly side once again. Who does Max Verstappen think he is? So entitled, acts like a petulant child. Can't understand why Checo would want to help him again going forward. Max surely owes him for the amount of times Perez has driven purely to benefit his title challenges the last 2 seasons. Perez has been nothing except a team player, a good old pal for Verstappen. This is clearly not intelligent to behave like that. You need an entire team to win races and championships. Just goes to prove once and for all, Max Verstappen is a horrible teammate. The other supportive side of Verstappen is holding on to the fact that Verstappen was just too far ahead, even though the driver ahead of him was Alonso and not Leclerc, and he cannot just park the car on the side and let Perez pass with Ocon being close behind. However, Verstappen could have slowed down the tempo and done this move safely, as the situation was much different than the sprint race. With that being said, it's evident that Max is losing a lot of fans and is now dividing the world as to whether or not he can be a likeable figure on the grid. What are your thoughts on Verstappen and his actions in Brazil? Let us know in the comments below.